Lee Hyun checked his watch for the third time in 5 minutes. The simulation room buzzed with nervous energy as 20 cadets prepared for their final test. After 3 years at the Terran Military Academy, this was it. Pass this exercise, and they would graduate as officers. Fail, and they would repeat the entire year. "Stop looking at your watch," Kim Nari said from the pilot's seat next to him. "It won't make the time go faster." Lee Hyun smiled. Nari always knew how to calm his nerves. She was the best pilot in their class, maybe in the entire academy. Her hands moved over the flight controls like she was born to fly. Where other pilots saw problems, Nari saw opportunities. "Attention, cadets!" The instructor's voice boomed through the speakers. "Today you will face your greatest challenge yet. You are up against the Vorthak Empire." Several cadets shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Even in simulation, the Vorthak had a scary reputation. They were known across the galaxy as brutal warriors who never showed mercy. Their ships were fast, their weapons were deadly, and they fought with no fear of death. "Your mission is simple," the instructor continued. "Defend Europa Station and the surrounding colonies from a full Vorthak assault. You have 5 ships, limited weapons, and whatever resources you can find. The simulation will test every skill you have learned. Good luck." Lee Hyun took a deep breath and looked around at his team. Park Ji-soo sat at the engineering station, her fingers already dancing across the controls. She could fix anything, build anything, and improve anything. If their ships needed modifications, Ji-soo was the person for the job. Choi Woo-jin prepared, his medical equipment at the support station. He was quiet and steady, never panicking even when everything went wrong. During their training missions, Woo-jin had saved more simulated lives than anyone else in their class. Yoon Min-ho adjusted his headset at the communication station. He was their link to the outside world, able to break enemy codes and coordinate with allied forces. Min-ho could make their small team work like a much larger army. "Simulation starting in 10 seconds, the instructor announced. Lee Hyun gripped his command chair. As team leader, everything depended on his decisions. He had studied every famous battle in human history, read every tactical manual, and practiced countless scenarios. But the Vorthak were different. They thought differently, fought differently, and never gave up. Simulation begins now. The main. Screen lit up with a view of space around Europa Station. Lee Hyun could see their 5 small ships floating near the station. In the distance, red dots appeared on the radar. The enemy was coming. "Contact!" Min-ho called out. "I'm picking up Vorthak signals. Looks like a full battle fleet." "How many ships?" Lee Hyun asked. "Scanning now. I count at least 30 vessels. Maybe more." Nari whistled softly. 30 against 5. They're not making this easy." Lee Hyun studied the tactical display. The Vorthak ships moved in perfect formation, like they had done this 1,000 times before. Their approach was textbook military doctrine, fast, direct, and overwhelming. "Something's wrong," he muttered. "What do you mean?" Ji-soo asked, looking up from her engineering console. "Look at their formation. It's too good, too real." Lee Hyun pointed at the screen. "The Academy simulations usually have some flaws, some predictable patterns. This looks like actual military movement." Nari laughed. "Maybe they upgraded the simulation software. Let's show these fake aliens what humans can do." She pushed her ship forward, accelerating toward the enemy formation. Her piloting was beautiful to watch. Smooth turns, perfect timing, always one step ahead of enemy fire. "Nari, fall back," Lee Hyun ordered. "We need to work together." "I'm fine," she replied. spinning her ship around an enemy blast. These Vorthak moved just like the training program said they would. But Lee Hyun noticed something else. When Nari fired her weapons, the enemy ships reacted faster than they should. They adapted to her tactics, changed their approach, and coordinated their response in ways that seemed too smart for a simulation. "Jisoo, can you check our communication systems?" he asked. "Sure thing." Her hands flew over the controls. "That's weird. We're broadcasting on multiple frequencies. Some of these aren't even Academy channels." "What do you mean?" "I mean our signals are going out on real military frequencies, active military frequencies." Jisoo frowned at her readings. "This equipment isn't supposed to access those networks." Lee Hyun felt a cold chill. "Minho, are you picking up any responses to our broadcasts?" "Actually, yes. I'm getting some strange signals back. They're encrypted, but the patterns look real, like actual military communications." "That's impossible," Woo Jin said. "We're in a simulation room. Nothing we do here can reach outside the Academy." But as Lee Hyun watched the enemy ships move, he became more convinced that something was very wrong. The Vorthak formation split into 3 groups, each one moving with purpose and intelligence. They weren't following a program. They were thinking. "New contacts!" Minho shouted. "More ships approaching from the edge of the system." Lee Hyun's heart raced. In 3 years of training, no simulation had ever added reinforcements mid-battle. The scenarios were always fixed from the beginning. "How many?" he asked. "I count." 12 more vessels, different design than the first group. Nari's ship shook as enemy fire got closer. "These guys are good. They're adapting to everything I do." "Fall back to the station," Lee Hyun ordered. "We need to regroup and figure out what's happening." As his team pulled their ships back toward Europa Station, Lee Hyun stared at the tactical display. The enemy formation was too perfect, too coordinated, too real. But that was impossible. They were in a simulation room on Europa Station. There was no way their training exercise could connect to actual military networks. "Jisoo, I need you to run a diagnostic on all our systems," he said. "Something isn't right here." "Already on it," she replied. "And Lee? I think you're right to be worried. These readings don't match any simulation I've ever seen." Lee Hyun made a decision that would change everything. Instead of following the standard Academy procedures, he would treat this like a real battle. If the enemy was acting real, then he would respond with real tactics. "Team, listen carefully," he said. "I don't think this is a simulation anymore. I think we might be in actual contact with actual Vorthak forces." The room went quiet except for the hum of equipment and the distant sound of simulated weapons fire. "That's crazy," Woo Jin said softly. "How could that happen?" "I don't know," Lee Hyun replied. "But if I'm right, then everything we do from now on is real. Real consequences, real danger, and real responsibility." He looked at each of his teammates. They were just students, barely adults, facing a situation that experienced officers might struggle with. But they were also the best students in their class, trained by the finest military academy in human space. "So what do we do?" Nari asked. "Lee." Hyun smiled grimly. "We show these Vorthak what human cadets can accomplish." Fleet Commander Thrak stared at the communication display with growing confusion. The message from the human military unit was unlike anything he had ever received. Most species sent formal challenges or demands for surrender when they prepared, for battle. But these humans were different. "War Leader Dern, what do you make of this transmission?" Thrak asked his tactical officer. Dern studied the data flowing across his screen. It appears to be an internal military communication, Commander. They are discussing battle plans against our forces as if we were merely another training exercise. Training exercise? Thrak's voice carried a dangerous edge. They speak of the mighty Vorthak Empire as practice? The bridge of the flagship grew quiet. Every Vorthak warrior understood the insult. Their empire had conquered dozens of worlds, defeated countless enemies, and spread fear across half the galaxy. No one spoke of them as mere practice. Perhaps it is a trick, suggested Navigator Kex from his station. Humans are known for deception in warfare. No, Dern replied, highlighting sections of the intercepted communication. Listen to their voices. They sound young, almost casual. One of them laughs when discussing our battle formations. This is not the behavior of soldiers trying to deceive us. Thrak activated the main display, showing the tactical situation around the human station called Europa. His fleet of 32 vessels moved steadily toward the target, while long-range sensors detected only 5 small human ships. 5 ships, against our entire 4th assault fleet, he mused. Yet they show no fear. Commander, called the communications officer, we are receiving more transmissions from the human position. They appear to be requesting volunteers from nearby colonies. Volunteers? Thrak turned sharply. For what purpose? They are asking for pilots to join what they call a training exercise. Hundreds of civilian craft are responding positively. Dern's mandibles clicked in amazement. They are mobilizing their civilian population for combat against us. This was troubling news. In all of Thrak's experience, civilian populations fled. When military forces approached, they hid, evacuated, or surrendered. They did not volunteer to fight the Vorthak Empire. What kind of military doctrine allows civilians to join active combat operations? He wondered aloud. A very confident one, Kex replied quietly. On the tactical display, Thrak watched as the 5 human ships moved in complex patterns around their station. Their pilot was exceptional, executing maneuvers that impressed even Vorthak standards, but it was their coordination that caught his attention. The ships worked together like they had fought side by side for years. Analyze their formation, he ordered Dern. Interesting patterns, Commander. They use unconventional spacing and timing. Our standard attack protocols are proving ineffective. Ineffective? Thrak had never heard those words applied to Vorthak tactics. They adapt faster than our systems can compensate. When we adjust our approach, they counter immediately. It is as if they can predict our tactical database. More concerning reports arrived from the sensor stations. The humans had somehow modified their equipment during the engagement, improving their defensive capabilities in real time. Their weapons signatures showed technology that Vorthak intelligence had never encountered. Commander, the communications officer interrupted, we have intercepted what appears to be human military history broadcasts. Show me. The display filled with translated human text and images. Thrak read about something called World War II, where humans fought each other with devastating effectiveness. He learned about human persistence in conflicts that lasted years, their ability to adapt to any environment, and their practice of total warfare involving entire populations. They fought themselves? Dern asked in disbelief. Multiple times, Thrak confirmed, reading further. And apparently won every time. That makes no sense, Commander. It does if you understand what we are facing, Thrak said slowly. A species that practices warfare against itself will be far more dangerous than one that only fights external enemies. The next transmission made things worse. The human commander, who sounded barely old enough to be a warrior, was discussing psychological warfare tactics. He spoke casually about human endurance, adaptability, and what he called creative problem solving. Creative problem solving? Kex repeated. What does that mean in military terms? They found out quickly. Human ships began broadcasting detailed analyses of Vorthak battle formations, pointing out weaknesses and suggesting improvements. Not threats or demands, but helpful advice on how to fight more effectively. They are teaching us how to better attack them, Dern said in amazement. Why would they do that? Thrak demanded. Because they are confident they can defeat us even if we improve, Kex answered. Or because they want a more challenging fight. Both possibilities were terrifying. Either the humans possessed military capabilities far beyond Vorthak intelligence estimates, or they enjoyed combat so much that they wanted stronger opponents. Commander, the sensor officer called. Long-range detection shows massive mobilization throughout human space. Civilian craft are moving toward our position from multiple star systems. Thrak studied the readings. Thousands of small ships, cargo, vessels, private craft, and industrial platforms were changing course to intercept his fleet. Military forces called for reinforcements. But these humans were recruiting their entire civilian population for a battle they had no obligation to fight. This is unprecedented, he muttered. Commander, Dern said carefully, perhaps we should request additional fleets. Thrak considered this. His fourth assault fleet was designed to conquer entire star systems. Against 5 human ships and some civilian volunteers, it should be overwhelming force. But everything about this situation defied his understanding of warfare. The humans showed no fear despite being outnumbered. They mobilized civilians like military units. They adapted their technology during combat. They spoke of galactic conquest as training exercises, and they offered tactical advice to their enemies while preparing to fight them. Send a priority message to High Command, Thrak decided. Request the 7th and 9th fleets as reinforcement. Commander, Dern sounded surprised. Against 5 human ships? No, Thrak replied, watching as more civilian craft joined the human formation. Against whatever military doctrine creates soldiers who volunteer their entire species for battle. As his fleet continued toward Europa Station, Thrak tried to understand what kind of enemy they faced. The humans acted like war was entertainment, like the Vorthak Empire was just another opponent in an endless series of conflicts. They treated overwhelming odds as interesting challenges rather than reasons for surrender. Most disturbing of all, they seemed genuinely excited about the fight. Commander, the communications officer reported, the human leader is now broadcasting what he calls intimidation protocols. He is listing human military victories and survival statistics. Let me hear this. The young human voice filled the bridge, speaking with calm confidence about human persistence, technological adaptation, and something called never giving up. He recited numbers about human population growth, industrial capacity, and what he termed creative destruction capability. When the broadcast ended, the bridge remained silent for long moments. Dern, Thrak said finally, how many species have the humans conquered? According to our intelligence commander, none. They have never expanded beyond their own star system. Then why do they sound like they have conquered the galaxy? No one had an answer for that question. But as Thrak watched the human ships prepare for battle, he began to suspect that his fleet was about to find out. Li Hyun stared at the tactical display with growing frustration. Whatever simulation program they were running had become incredibly sophisticated. The enemy ships were adapting to every strategy his team tried, countering their moves with responses. That seemed too intelligent for any training software. "This is getting ridiculous," Nari said, pulling her fighter back from another failed attack run. "These fake Vorthak are learning faster than any AI should be able to." "Maybe that's the point," Jisoo suggested from her engineering station. "The final test is supposed to be nearly impossible. They want to see how we handle overwhelming odds." Lee Hyun nodded, but something still felt wrong. The enemy responses were too realistic, too creative. Standard training programs followed, predictable patterns, but these opponents seemed to think like actual military commanders. "Minho, are you still picking up those strange communications?" he asked. "Yes, and they're getting stronger. It's like there are real ships out there broadcasting on military frequencies." Minho adjusted his headset. "I'm also getting civilian emergency signals from colonies throughout the system." "Emergency signals?" "Yeah, they're asking for evacuation assistance, something about incoming hostile forces." Lee Hyun felt his stomach drop. "What kind of hostile forces?" "They're calling them Vorthak invasion fleets." The bridge went silent except for the hum of equipment. Lee Hyun looked at each of his teammates, seeing his own growing fear reflected in their faces. "That's impossible," Woojin said quietly. "We're in a simulation room. How could real colonies be sending real emergency signals?" "I don't know," Lee Hyun replied, "but if we really are connected to actual military networks, then maybe this isn't a simulation anymore." The idea was terrifying. They were students, not officers. They had never faced real combat, never made decisions that affected real lives. But if Minho was right about those emergency signals, then real. People were counting on them. "Okay," Lee Hyun said, making a decision that would change everything. "Let's assume this is real. Let's assume we're actually facing actual Vorthak forces, and actual colonies need our help. What do we do?" "We fight," Nari said immediately. "Same as always." "But we're outnumbered 30-1, Woojin protested. "Then we don't fight fair," Jisoo said with a grin. "We fight smart." Lee Hyun smiled. This was why he loved his team. When faced with impossible odds, they didn't panic or give up. They looked for creative solutions. "All right, here's what we're going to do. Conventional tactics aren't working against these opponents, so we'll try something unconventional." He pulled up a new display showing the entire Europa system. Dozens of civilian colonies, mining stations, and transport hubs dotted the star map. Most were sending emergency signals, but some were offering to help. "Minho, I want you to contact every civilian facility in the system. Tell them we need volunteers for a special military operation." "What kind of operation?" "We're going to turn the entire system into one big weapon." Jisoo's eyes lit up. "I like where this is going." Lee Hyun began outlining his plan. Instead of fighting the Vorthak fleet directly, they would use the system's infrastructure against them. Mining stations could become weapon platforms. Cargo ships could carry explosive charges. Even passenger liners could serve as sensor networks or decoy targets. "That's insane," Woojin said. "You want to turn civilians into soldiers?" "I want to give them a chance to defend themselves," Lee Hyun corrected. "The Vorthak are coming whether we fight them or not. At least this way, everyone has a role to play." Minho began broadcasting their recruitment message to every facility in the system. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Miners offered to rig their drilling equipment as weapons. Cargo pilots volunteered to fly dangerous missions. Even families on passenger stations asked how they could help. "This is incredible," Minho reported. Thousands of people are volunteering. They're not scared at all. Of course they're not scared, Nari said. They're human. While Minho coordinated. With the volunteers, Jasoo began working on technical modifications. She had discovered that their training equipment could interface with real system networks, allowing her to upgrade defensive platforms and weapon systems throughout Europa. "Lee, you need to see this," she said excitedly. "I can link all the mining stations into a coordinated defense grid, and the cargo haulers can be modified to carry enough explosives to damage even Vorthak warships. How long will the modifications take?" "For basic systems, maybe an hour. For the advanced stuff, give me 2 hours and I can turn this entire system into a fortress." Lee Hyun looked at the tactical display again. The enemy fleet was still approaching, but more slowly now. It was almost like they were being cautious, unsure what to expect from human defenders. "Wu Jin, start setting up medical stations throughout the system. If this gets bad, we'll need treatment facilities everywhere." "Already on it," Wu Jin replied. "I'm linking with civilian medical facilities to coordinate trauma protocols." As his team worked, Lee Hyun began to feel more confident. Maybe they were just students, but they were human students. And humans had never been good at accepting impossible odds. "Minho, are you still monitoring those enemy communications?" "Yeah. And Lee?" "They sound worried." "Worried? About what?" "About us. They're requesting reinforcements." Lee Hyun laughed despite the situation. "They're calling for backup against 5 cadets and some volunteers?" "Apparently. I'm picking up signals from at least 2 more enemy fleets heading this way." "Good," Nari said. "More targets." That was pure Nari. Where other pilots saw overwhelming opposition, she saw opportunities for glory. But Lee Han was beginning to understand something important about their situation. The enemy was scared. Despite having overwhelming numerical superiority, despite facing what they thought were just 5 human ships, the Vorthak were calling for reinforcements. That suggested they were taking the human defenders very seriously. "Team," he said, "I think we've been approaching this wrong. We've been thinking like students facing a test, but maybe we should be thinking like humans facing invaders." "What's the difference?" Wu Jin asked. "Students try to pass. Humans try to win." Over the next hour, the Europa system transformed. Mining stations repositioned themselves into defensive formations. Cargo ships loaded with improvised explosives took patrol routes around critical facilities. Civilian vessels formed communication networks that would let the entire system coordinate, like a single military unit. Jasoo's technical modifications were even more impressive than promised. She had turned asteroid mining equipment into long-range weapons, converted civilian factories into ammunition production facilities, and linked every computer system in the area into a coordinated defense network. "This is beautiful," she said, admiring her work. "The entire system is now one big military installation. How effective will it be against real warships?" Lee Hyun asked. "Against normal warships? Probably not very, but these modifications are unlike anything in standard military doctrine. The enemy won't know how to counter them because they've never seen anything like this before." That was the key insight. Human defenders didn't need to be stronger than their enemies. They just needed to be different enough that standard enemy tactics wouldn't work. "Minho, send a message to the approaching Vorthak fleet." "What should I tell them?" Lee Hyun smiled. "Tell them that the Europa system is under human protection. Offer them one chance to withdraw peacefully. And if they refuse, then we show them what happens when you threaten human colonies." As the message went out, Lee Hyun felt a strange sense of calm. They were still just students, still outnumbered, still facing impossible odds. But they were also human. And humans had a long history of doing impossible things when they had no other choice. Fleet Commander Thrak read the human message 3 times before he fully understood what they were offering. The young voice from Europa Station was giving him a chance to withdraw peacefully. Not a desperate plea for mercy, not a formal surrender, but a polite invitation to leave. "They are offering us terms," he said to War Leader Dern, "before the battle has even begun." "What kind of terms?" "Safe passage out of the system in exchange for an agreement not to return." Dern's mandibles clicked in confusion. "They are outnumbered. 100 to 1, and they offer us safe passage?" The situation made no sense by traditional military logic. When facing overwhelming force, defenders typically tried to negotiate from a position of weakness. They begged for mercy, offered tribute, or surrendered unconditionally. They did not calmly offer their enemies safe passage as if they were doing them a favor. "Commander," the sensor officer called out, "long-range scans show massive changes. In the target system, every installation appears to be coordinating defensive movements." "Show me." The tactical display revealed something Thrak had never seen before. The entire Europa system was moving like a single organism. Mining stations had repositioned themselves into overlapping fields of fire. Cargo vessels moved in complex patterns that created multiple defensive layers. Even civilian habitats had somehow become part of the defensive network. "How many ships are we facing now?" Thrak asked. "Difficult to determine, Commander. The enemy has converted civilian vessels into military assets. Current count shows over 3,000 potential combat units." 3,000? Dern sounded shocked. "From 5 ships? It appears the humans can rapidly mobilize their entire civilian population for military purposes." This was deeply troubling. Most species kept clear distinctions between military and civilian roles. Soldiers fought, civilians hid. But these humans seemed to operate on a completely different principle. Everyone was a potential warrior. Every ship was a potential weapon. Every facility was a potential fortress. "Commander," the communications officer interrupted, "we are receiving new transmissions from the human position. They appear to be broadcasting psychological warfare materials." "Let me hear it." The speakers filled with the voice of the young human commander. But instead of threats or demands, he was telling stories. Stories about human military history, about impossible victories against overwhelming odds, about a species that never accepted defeat. He spoke about something called the Battle of Thermopylae, where 300 humans held off thousands of enemies. He described human behavior during what they called world wars, where entire populations mobilized for conflicts that lasted years. He recited statistics about human persistence, adaptability, and what he called refusing to give up, even when losing. "Is this accurate information?" Thrak asked his intelligence officer. "Checking databases now, Commander." "Yes. These appear to be factual historical records. Humans have a documented pattern of achieving victory against superior forces through unconventional tactics and extreme persistence." Extreme persistence? They appear to continue fighting long after rational analysis suggests defeat is inevitable. In some cases, they have won conflicts by simply refusing to acknowledge that they had lost. The next transmission was even more unsettling. The human commander was now broadcasting technical specifications for their defensive modifications, not to brag or intimidate, but as what he called educational material for our opponents. "They are teaching us about their weapons," Dern observed. "Why would they do that?" Unknown, Commander. Either they want us to understand the futility of attack, or they are so confident in their capabilities that revealing their methods poses no risk. Both possibilities were terrifying. Thrak had spent decades fighting across the galaxy, facing dozens of different species. Some were stronger, some were faster, some had better technology, but none had ever voluntarily explained their defensive systems to their enemies during the approach to battle. "Commander," the sensor officer called urgently, "detecting massive energy signatures from the target system. The humans appear to be charging weapons platforms of unknown design." "Unknown design?" "Yes, sir. They seem to have converted industrial equipment into military hardware. Mining lasers modified for ship-to-ship combat, cargo containers rigged as explosive devices, civilian factories producing ammunition in real time." Thrak studied the readings with growing amazement. The humans had turned their entire economic infrastructure into a weapons production system. Factories that built civilian goods now manufactured military supplies. Cargo ships that carried trade. Goods now transported explosive devices. Mining equipment that extracted resources now served as defensive weapons. "How long did this conversion take?" he asked. "Based on our observations, Commander, approximately 2 hours." 2 hours? Dern sounded incredulous. "They militarized an entire star system in 2 hours? "It appears so, War Leader. This was beyond anything in Vorthak military doctrine. Converting civilian infrastructure to military purposes was a complex process that typically required months of planning and specialized equipment. But these humans had accomplished it in the time it took Thrak's fleet to cross a single star system." "Commander," the communications officer reported, "the 7th and 9th fleets have arrived at the edge of the system. We now have over 90 ships in the combined fleet." "Good. Signal both fleet commanders to join us for tactical conference." Within minutes, the holographic images of fleet commanders Grex and Vorth appeared on the bridge. Both were experienced warriors who had conquered numerous systems for the Empire. "Report," Grex demanded immediately. "We face an unusual situation," Thrak began. "The human defenders appear to operate on military principles unlike anything in our experience." He explained what they had observed: the rapid mobilization of civilian populations, the conversion of economic infrastructure to military purposes, the casual confidence in the face of overwhelming odds, and the strange practice of offering tactical advice to enemies. "You are telling me," Vorth said slowly, "that these humans have turned their entire society into a military force?" "That appears to be correct." "In 2 hours?" "Yes. And they offer us safe passage despite being outnumbered?" "Correct again." "Both." Commanders were silent for long moments. "What do our intelligence files say about human military capabilities?" Grex asked. "Very little, Commander. They have never expanded beyond their home system, never engaged in galactic warfare, never demonstrated significant military technology." "Then how do you explain what we are observing?" Thrak had been asking himself the same question. "I believe we may have misunderstood the nature of human civilization. What we interpreted as peaceful expansion may actually be a species that has no need to conquer other systems, because they can turn any system into an impregnable fortress." "You think they are defensive specialists?" "No, Commander. I think they are warfare specialists who have never needed to demonstrate their capabilities because no one has been foolish enough to threaten them. The tactical display updated with new information. The human defensive network had grown even more complex, with additional layers of protection and weapon systems that defied conventional analysis." "How do we attack this?" Dern asked. Standard. Assault protocols appear inadequate, Thrak admitted. They have created a defensive system with no apparent weaknesses and no predictable patterns. Then we use overwhelming force, Grex declared. 90 ships against whatever they have constructed. With respect, Commander, I believe that approach may be exactly what they expect us to try. What do you mean? They offered us safe passage. Before they knew about our reinforcements, that suggests they were confident they could handle our original force. Now that we have 90 ships, they have not changed their offer or shown any additional concern. You think they planned for this? I think they planned for much worse than this. As if to confirm his fears, the communications officer called out again. Commander, we are receiving another message from the human position. What now? The human commander is requesting a direct conversation with our fleet leadership. He says he has a proposal that might interest us. Thrak looked at his fellow commanders. In his entire military career, he had never encountered a situation where outnumbered defenders requested negotiations with their attackers. Usually, it was the other way around. Put him through, he decided. The voice that came through the speakers was young, confident, and completely unafraid. Greetings, Vorthak commanders. My name is Li Hyan, and I represent the human defenders of this system. I understand you have been reinforced and now have approximately 90 ships. Congratulations on your impressive mobilization speed. You called to congratulate us? Thrak asked, confused. Among other things, I called to make you an offer that I think you will find very interesting. Li Hyun took a deep breath before activating the communication channel. 3 Vorthak fleet commanders were waiting to hear his proposal, and he had no idea what he was going to say. His team looked at him with a mixture of confidence and terror. Just remember, Nari whispered. They called for reinforcements. That means they're scared of us. We're 5 students, Wu Jin protested quietly. They don't know that, Jisoo pointed out. To them, we're the representatives of human military doctrine. Li Hyun nodded and opened the channel. Greetings, Vorthak, commanders. Thank you for accepting this communication. I have studied your military reputation, and I must say, I am impressed by your tactical capabilities. You requested this conversation, came the reply from Fleet Commander Thrak. What is your proposal? I want to offer you something that I believe will benefit both our peoples. A chance to end this conflict with honor for everyone involved. There was a pause before Thrak responded. You speak of honor while outnumbered. 90 to 1? Numbers are not everything in warfare, Commander. As I am sure you know from your own military experience, victory depends on many factors beyond simple ship counts. Li Hyun was making this up as he went, but he tried to sound confident. Around him, his team continued working. Jisoo was adding new modifications to the defensive network. Minho was coordinating with volunteer ships throughout the system. Wu Jin was preparing medical stations. Nari was running combat simulations. What kind of proposal? Asked a different voice. Probably one of the other commanders. I propose that we demonstrate our respective capabilities through limited engagement. Your forces against our defenses with specific rules and objectives. Think of it as a military exercise with real stakes. A test of strength? Exactly. If your forces can successfully penetrate our defensive perimeter and reach Europa Station, we will acknowledge Vorthak's superiority and negotiate surrender terms. If our defenses hold, you acknowledge human defensive capabilities and withdraw from the system. Li Hyun had no idea if this was a good idea, but it bought them time and gave them a chance to demonstrate their improvements. More importantly, it sounded like something a confident military commander might propose. Interesting, Thrak replied. What rules did you have in mind? Standard engagement protocols. No weapons targeting civilian populations, no destruction of essential infrastructure, combat limited to military assets. First side to achieve their objective wins, and our objective would be reach Europa Station with at least 10 ships intact. Our objective is to prevent that. Lee Hyun muted the communication and looked at his team. Can we actually stop 10 ships from reaching the station? With what Jisoo has built? Absolutely, Nari said. The question is whether we can do it impressively enough to convince them not to try a full assault. I can make it very impressive, Jisoo promised. Lee Hyun reopened the channel. Commanders, do you find these terms acceptable? There was a longer pause this time. Lee Hyun could imagine the alien commanders discussing the proposal, trying to decide if it was a trap or genuine offer. We accept, Thrak finally said, but we choose which ships participate in the test. Of course. You have 1 hour to prepare. We will use the time to finalize our defensive positions. Agreed. Test engagement begins in 1 hour. The channel closed and Lee Hyun slumped back in his command chair. I can't believe they agreed to that. It was brilliant, Minho said. You turned a hopeless battle into a manageable challenge. Now, we just have to win the challenge, Woo Jin pointed out. We will, Jisoo said confidently. I have some surprises ready for our guests. The next hour passed quickly. Jisoo implemented her final modifications to the defensive network, creating weapon systems that combined mining equipment, cargo handling machinery, and civilian manufacturing tools into something completely unique. Minho coordinated with thousands of volunteer ships, positioning them for maximum effectiveness. Woo Jin prepared emergency medical protocols. Nari ran final combat simulations. Lee Hyun spent the time studying Vorthak tactical doctrine, looking for weaknesses they could exploit. Time, Minho announced. Here they come, Nari reported. 10 ships, moving in standard Vorthak assault formation. Lee Hyun watched the tactical display as enemy ships approached their defensive perimeter. The Vorthak formation was textbook perfect, designed to overwhelm defensive positions through coordinated assault. Jisoo, initiate defensive protocols. With pleasure. The first surprise was the mining laser array. Jisoo had linked dozens of asteroid mining stations into a coordinated targeting system that created overlapping fields of energy weapons fire. The Vorthak ships found themselves flying through a maze of laser beams that forced them to break formation. The second surprise was the cargo container field. Thousands of shipping containers, rigged with proximity explosives and maneuvering thrusters, created a dynamic obstacle course that shifted and moved unpredictably. The Vorthak pilots had to constantly adjust course to avoid running into explosive surprises. The third surprise was the communication warfare. Minho began broadcasting false sensor readings, conflicting navigation data, and what appeared to be human tactical discussions directly onto Vorthak communication frequencies. The enemy pilots found themselves receiving confusing information from multiple sources. They're adapting, Nari observed, but slowly. The Vorthak ships were indeed learning to counter the human defenses, but not fast enough. By the time they figured out how to handle the mining lasers, they ran into the cargo container field. When they developed tactics for the containers, Minho's communication jamming confused their coordination. 4 ships down, Lee Hyun reported. 6 remaining. Not down, Jisoo corrected. Disabled. I'm being careful not to cause permanent damage. Why? Because we want them to respect us, not hate us. The remaining 6 Vorthak ships made a coordinated push toward Europa Station, using advanced tactics that impressed even Lee Hyun. But Jisoo had one final surprise waiting. "Activating the net," she announced. Hundreds of civilian cargo ships, positioned throughout the defensive zone, suddenly extended magnetic grappling cables in a coordinated pattern. The result was an enormous three-dimensional net that enclosed the approaching Vorthak ships without damaging them. "Got them," Nari said with satisfaction. The 6 remaining enemy ships found themselves trapped in a web of magnetic cables, unable to advance or retreat without risking damage to their vessels. "Test engagement complete," Lee Hyun announced over the communication channel. "Vorthak forces have been prevented from reaching their objective." There was a long silence before Thrak responded. "How did you coordinate so many civilian vessels so precisely?" "Human civilian populations are trained to support military operations when necessary. Every ship captain in the system knew their role in the defensive plan." Every ship captain? Everyone. Humans believe that civilian and military roles are interchangeable during emergencies. Another pause. "Release our ships." "Of course." Jisoo, disengage the net. The trapped Vorthak ships found themselves free to return to their fleet. Lee Hyun watched them go, hoping his gamble had worked. "Commander Thrak," he said, "I believe this demonstration has shown that both our forces are capable and professional. Perhaps we can discuss more productive ways for our peoples to interact." "What did you have in mind?" "Mutual respect, for starters. The Vorthak Empire has an impressive military reputation. Humans have defensive capabilities that might interest you. Perhaps we could exchange tactical knowledge instead of exchanging weapons fire. You would share military information with us?" "Why not? We are both warriors. We can learn from each other." Lee Hyun was completely making this up, but it seemed to be working. The alien commanders sounded genuinely interested in the idea of military cooperation instead of military conquest. "This is unusual," Thrak admitted. "Humans prefer unusual solutions to difficult problems." "Very well. The Vorthak Empire accepts your proposal for tactical exchange and mutual respect. We will withdraw from this system and establish communication. Protocols for future cooperation." "Excellent. We look forward to learning from your experience." The channel closed, and Lee Hyun watched in amazement as 90 Vorthak warships began leaving the Europa system. They had actually done it. 5. Students had convinced an alien empire to withdraw through a combination of bluff, creativity, and pure human stubbornness. "Simulation complete," announced the academy instructor over the intercom. "Perfect scores for all participants. Congratulations on completing an impossible scenario." Lee Hyun looked at his teammates in confusion. "Simulation? But those emergency, signals." "What emergency signals?" the instructor asked, entering the simulation room. The exercise ran perfectly. No external communications, no civilian involvement, just a standard tactical scenario. But we detected real Vorthak communications. The new AI system is very sophisticated. It generates realistic responses to make the simulation more challenging. Lee Hyun stared at the now blank tactical display. So none of that was real. Of course not. How could a training exercise connect to actual alien fleets? As they left the simulation room, Lee Hyun couldn't shake the feeling that something important had happened. Maybe it was just training. Maybe it was just an advanced computer program.